You ever get that feeling that something is watching you, even when you are completely alone? That strange chill, the silence so loud it screams at you? That was our house, until we dug it up. If you love mysterious family stories with chilling secrets, hit subscribe, like, and tell me in the comments. What would you do if your child drew this? When I married Thomas, I knew I was walking into a story that had already started. He was a good man, quiet, stable, dependable. The kind of man who could make you feel safe by just standing beside you. But he was also a man with a past, and that past had a name, Angela, his late wife. Angela had died in a car accident 3 years before I met him. Everyone in town knew about it. Small towns have long memories. The kind that stretch across decades and whisper between coffee spoons in kitchens that have seen too much. I heard the stories before I ever heard her name from Thomas himself. They said she had been kind, soft-spoken, a devoted mother to their daughter, Ellie. They said the accident was tragic, sudden, and brutal. But no one ever really talked about Ellie. She was 7 when I met her. 10 now. Small for her age, thin, with hair too dark for her pale complexion and eyes that never quite settled on you for too long. She rarely spoke. And when she did, it was in clipped phrases. No contractions. No questions. Just quiet, flat statements that landed like stones dropped in still water. At first, I assumed it was grief. That made sense. A child losing her mother like that would naturally turn inward. Thomas warned me not to take it personally. She is slow to warm, he said, but she is a good kid. He was right. Ellie never caused trouble. Never threw tantrums. Never broke things or raised her voice. But that silence, it was not peaceful. It was watching, waiting, listening to something I could not hear. I remember the first drawing. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. Thomas was at work, and I was folding laundry in the living room. Ellie sat on the carpet across from me with her crayons and a stack of printer paper. Nothing unusual. She liked to draw. Mostly animals and flowers. Harmless, childish scribbles. But this time was different. She was quiet, still, focused in a way that made the air feel thick. I caught glimpses of her face, tense, furrowed, like she was remembering something painful. When she finished, she stood, placed the drawing face down on the coffee table, and walked out of the room. I waited a moment, unsure why I felt nervous, then picked up the paper. It was a tree. A single, massive oak tree, drawn in heavy black crayon. The branches reached out like claws, sharp and bare, and the roots twisted downward into the page. At the base of the tree, scrawled in thick red letters, were the words, "Right here." That was it. No animals. No flowers. No sun or sky or smiling stick figures. Just that one tree. And those 2 words. I felt something cold brush the back of my neck. I called out to her, "Ellie, sweetie. Did you draw this from memory?" She appeared in the hallway, staring at me with her head tilted slightly. Then she nodded once and walked away. I turned the drawing over in my hands again. It was just crayon on paper. Nothing else. No reason for my hands to be shaking. That night, I showed it to Thomas. He looked at it, blinked slowly, then shrugged. She has always been creative. Probably something from school. She does not go to school, I reminded him. We homeschool her. He frowned. Right. Then maybe a dream. I nodded, but I did not believe it. The next day, I found another drawing. Same tree. Same style. Same ominous message beneath it, right here. This one was taped to the refrigerator. I asked Ellie about it. She said nothing. Just looked at me with those still, quiet eyes. The third drawing came the following morning. It was slid under our bedroom door. I found it when I got up to use the bathroom at 2 a.m. I stopped asking her about them after that. By the 5th drawing, I started sleeping with the lights on in the hallway. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That there was nothing inherently threatening about a tree or the words, "Right here." Kids fixate on things. That was normal, right? But I could not shake the feeling that the message was not random. It was targeted, deliberate. Saturday came. The sky was unusually bright. Clear blue. No wind. The kind of day that feels like it is daring you to make plans. So I did. "Ellie," I said, "how about we go for a walk?" She looked up at me from her drawing table. "Just the two of us," I added. She did not smile. She never smiled. But she did nod. That was the most enthusiasm I had seen from her in weeks. We walked past the swings and the rose garden. Past the duck pond where the geese always gathered like little judgmental old men. We passed the footbridge, then the small playground where rusted monkey bars clanged in the wind. Then she tugged my sleeve. "There," she said. Her voice was almost a whisper. She pointed to the edge of the park, where a single oak tree stood alone. It looked just like the one in her drawings. I stared at it for a long moment. It was enormous. Thick, gnarled old. Easily 100 years. Its roots broke through the soil like veins, twisting and bulging under the grass. Its branches were bare, though it was the middle of spring. I crouched down beside her. "Is that the tree you keep drawing?" She did not answer. I tried again. "Why do you write right here underneath it?" She turned her head slightly, her voice low and flat. "That is where she is." My mouth went dry. "Who, Ellie?" She did not reply. Instead, she turned and walked away. That night, I could not stop thinking about what she said. That is where she is. What did she mean? I wanted to tell Thomas, but I did not. Not yet. I was still trying to make sense of it. Still trying to be the reasonable one. The steady one. But inside, I was unraveling. I stayed up late, pacing the kitchen. Eventually, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the table with the drawings. 7 of them now. All identical. All signed in the bottom right corner in Ellie's careful print, E.T. I flipped through them, looking for differences. Clues. The 6th one, I swear I had not noticed this before, had something faint in the branches. A face, maybe? Or a figure. I held it under the light, squinting. Yes. A silhouette. Thin, barely there. But it was not part of the tree. It was in the tree. Watching. I placed it down quickly. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. And I was the only one who seemed to notice. They say that houses remember. That wood absorbs the weight of footsteps, that walls hold onto the sounds people try to forget, and that attics and basements are never really empty. They're just waiting for the right silence to start whispering again. After the walk to the park and Ellie's strange words, "That is where she is," the house began to feel different. It was not something I could explain to Thomas, though I tried. He would smile politely, the way people smile when they think you're overreacting but do not want to say so out loud. He would listen just long enough to be respectful, then say something like, "You are probably just tired," or "You have been reading too many dark books lately." But I knew what I felt. The rooms had changed. They were colder. Heavier. Especially at night. It began subtly. A creak here. A knock there. But not the usual kind of knocks. Not the settling of the house or pipes expanding. These were sharp. Intentional. Rhythmic. 3 soft taps. Always at 3 in the morning. The first time, I was half asleep, unsure if I had dreamed it. I looked at the clock, 3:01 a.m., then lay back down and told myself it was nothing. The second time, I got up. The knock had come from downstairs. I crept down in the dark, heart racing, every stair groaning under my weight. I expected to find Ellie in the kitchen, maybe sneaking a snack. But the lights were off. No movement. I walked through the rooms, flipping switches as I went. Empty. Then I heard it again. 3 knocks. But this time, from the basement door. I stood frozen in the hallway. The knock was not frantic. It was soft. Calm. Almost patient. Tap. 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 I reached for the doorknob, but my hand refused to close around it. My whole body was tense, like I had just walked into a trap I had not seen being set. Eventually, I backed away. When I returned to bed, Ellie's door was cracked open. I could see her inside, sitting up, staring out the window. She did not look at me. The next morning, I found another drawing in the pantry. Same tree. Same message. Right here. But this one had something different. A date was written in small letters under the red text. May 12th. I asked Ellie about it. She was sitting at the dining table with her cereal, chewing slowly, blank-eyed. Ellie, do you know what this means? She looked at me and said something I will never forget. She remembers. I blinked. Who does? Ellie returned to her cereal without answering. Later that day, I brought up the date to Thomas. May 12th. He repeated, setting down his coffee mug. Yes. Does that mean anything to you? He rubbed his chin. It sounds familiar. That might have been Angela's birthday, I think. No, I said carefully. Not Angela. His expression shifted. What are you asking me? I swallowed. Did you ever know someone named Rachel? He went still. I could see it in his eyes. Not recognition. Not confusion. Guilt. He masked it quickly, but it had already slipped through. Where did you hear that name? I told him I had overheard Ellie saying it. Ellie does not remember Rachel, he said too quickly. She was a baby when Rachel left. Left. She was not well. She walked out one day and never came back. You mean she abandoned Ellie? He nodded slowly. She was unstable. I tried to make it work. But in the end, she was a danger to herself. I raised Ellie alone after that. I studied his face. He believed what he was saying. Or at least he had repeated it enough to make himself believe it. But what if Ellie does remember? I asked. What if she is trying to tell us something? Thomas shook his head. She is just confused. You are encouraging it. She draws creepy things, sure, but that is just imagination. She needs structure, not ghost stories. Ghost stories. He said it like I was the problem. That night, I could not sleep. At 3 a.m., the knocks returned. 3 soft, deliberate taps. I got out of bed, this time with a flashlight in hand. The hallway felt colder than usual. The house was completely still. Even the air had stopped moving. I made my way to the basement. The door was closed, but something was different. There was a smell. Faint. Earthy. Damp. Like soil that had been recently disturbed. I opened the door. The stairs groaned as I descended, every creak echoing louder than it should. At the bottom, I swept the flashlight across the floor. Nothing. Just the furnace, storage bins, and a stack of old furniture under a dusty sheet. But then I saw it. A piece of paper on the floor, at the foot of the stairs. Another drawing. Tree. Roots. Words. Right here. But this one had something new, a pair of eyes drawn in the roots. They stared upward. Lifeless. Unblinking. I picked it up with trembling fingers and turned it over. There, in neat pencil. Ask him what happened on May 12, 2012. I stared at it. This was not a child's imagination. This was a message. And I was starting to feel like it was not just Ellie trying to send it. The next day, I returned to the park alone. I stood before the tree. Everything in me told me not to, but I walked around its base, stepping carefully around the roots. And then I saw it. A small, unnatural rise in the dirt. Just a few inches tall. Like the ground had been disturbed and hastily packed back down. I knelt and pressed my hand to it. Cold. Still soft underneath. I did not dig. Not yet. I needed more. Back at the house, I started looking through the storage boxes in the garage. Old records. Family photos. Tax papers. Nothing suspicious. Until I found a shoebox tucked beneath a false bottom in one of the plastic bins. Inside, a handful of old letters. Most were addressed to Thomas Everett, the handwriting neat and elegant. Some were love letters. Others, darker. One said, "If you take her from me, I will never stop looking. She is mine." Another, "You lied to me. You said you loved me, but you just wanted a child." I read them all, my hands shaking. At the bottom of the box, A hospital bracelet. Patient name, Rachel and Porter. Admit date, May 10, 2012. Discharge, signed against medical advice. I gasped. May 12th. The same date Ellie had written. The same date on the drawing. That was the last time anyone saw Rachel alive. And I was starting to believe that someone had made sure she would never be seen again. When I turned around, Ellie was standing in the doorway. "You are close," she whispered. I stared at her, heart pounding. Close to what? She looked down at the floor, then back up at me. To where she is. By the time I decided to dig, I had already convinced myself that nothing would be there. It was the only way I could go through with it. I told myself it was just a coincidence. That the drawings, the date, the letters, they were pieces from a broken past, scattered and misunderstood. They did not fit together. They did not have to. But somewhere deeper inside me, under all the rationalizations, I already knew. I waited until Saturday. Thomas was scheduled to be at a client's property all day. He worked in construction and sometimes supervised site visits out of town. I told him Ellie and I would spend the day doing art projects and cleaning the attic. He did not ask any questions. When I loaded the shovel into the trunk of my car, my hands trembled. I tucked it under a blanket, as if hiding it from view would make it less real. Ellie stood at the front door, watching me. She did not say anything. She never did when it mattered most. We drove in silence. The park was unusually quiet for a weekend. Just a few joggers and one woman pushing a stroller near the entrance. The rest was empty. We walked together, slowly, until we reached the tree. The same tree from every drawing. The same roots that stretched like fingers across the earth. I turned to Ellie. "Show me," I said. She did not hesitate. She walked to the base of the tree and placed both hands on the ground, pressing them into a patch of grass where the roots parted slightly, revealing a soft patch of dirt beneath. "Here," she whispered. Then she stepped back and folded her arms, staring down at the spot like a sentinel. I knelt beside the tree. The dirt was loose. I took the shovel from where I had hidden it beneath a nearby bench and began to dig. Each scoop of earth was heavier than it should have been. Not in weight, but in meaning. Every inch deeper felt like peeling back a layer of something that should have stayed buried. After 10 minutes, I hit something. It was not rock. Not metal. Fabric. I paused. Ellie stood motionless, her hands at her sides, face pale. I knelt and brushed the dirt aside with my hands. A corner of cloth emerged, gray, mold-stained, wrapped tightly around something hard. I hesitated. Then, carefully, I pulled it out. It was a box. Small. Wooden. No lock. No inscription. Just old wood bound in twine. My heart pounded in my ears. I sat back on my heels and opened it. Inside, there were photographs. Hundreds of them. Stacked in no particular order, some curled with age, others water-damaged. I picked one up. It showed Thomas. Younger, thinner, smiling beside a woman I had never seen before. Not Angela. This woman had dark hair, pale skin, a narrow face. She looked nothing like Angela. And in her arms, a baby. Ellie. Photo after photo, the same woman, holding Ellie, standing with Thomas, standing alone, sitting on a porch, smiling in a hospital gown. Some were torn. A few had writing on the back. Rachel, June 2011. Ellie's first day home, July 2012. Thomas and R, March 2012. My fingers were numb. I looked up at Ellie. "Is this your mom?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "My real mom," she said. There was no emotion in her voice. No sadness. No nostalgia. Just truth. I turned back to the box. Under the photos, I found a stack of folded papers, letters, printed emails, appointment receipts. One stood out. A death certificate. Rachel and Porter. Date of death, May 12, 2012. Cause of death, unspecified. Status, presumed deceased. No confirmed remains. Presumed. I stared at the word. Presumed. She had never been found. Until now? I looked back down at the ground I had dug. The box was shallow, resting just a few inches under the surface. But what if there was more? What if this was only the beginning? "Ellie," I said gently, "is there anything else buried here?" She looked down. Yes. I stood. I dug deeper. The shovel struck something hard. I dropped to my knees again and brushed away the dirt. Another layer of cloth. Heavier. Wrapped around something large. I dug around it until I could pull it free. It was a pillowcase. Old. Torn. Stained. Something was inside. Hands trembling, I opened it. Inside was a child's stuffed rabbit, a small purple blanket, and a pair of baby shoes. Each item neatly folded, cleaned, preserved. These were not just memories. They were part of a goodbye, or a burial. I stared at Ellie. "Did your mom bury this?" She shook her head. "He did." "Who?" "Daddy." I swallowed. I wanted to argue, to say she was confused, that this was trauma, or fantasy, or something explainable. But I could not. Not after what I had found. That night, I waited for Thomas to return. I put the photos back in the box. The death certificate. The blanket. The rabbit. Everything. I left the box on the kitchen table. When he walked through the door, he stopped in his tracks. His eyes locked on the box. He said nothing. I said, "I know." He sat down slowly, looking more exhausted than I had ever seen him. "I never wanted you to find that," he said. "I figured." He rubbed his face. "I loved her, you know. I really did." "Then what happened?" "She was sick. You have no idea what it was like. Every day she got worse. Paranoid. Accusatory. She thought I was trying to take Ellie from her." "Were you?" He hesitated. "I was trying to protect Ellie." I waited. She came home from the hospital that day, May 12th. She had signed herself out against advice. I tried to talk to her. She lost it. Said I was poisoning Ellie against her. That she would take her and disappear. "What did you do?" "We fought. She tried to grab Ellie. She pushed me. I pushed back. She fell." His voice broke. She did not move. I waited. Checked her pulse. Nothing. I panicked. "So you buried her?" He nodded slowly. I could not call the police. No one would have believed me. And then Ellie. She was so quiet. She saw it. I know she did. But she never spoke about it. I said nothing. He looked at me. "You think I am a monster?" "I think you buried a woman under a tree and lied to everyone for 10 years. He looked down. Ellie stood in the hallway, listening. She did not cry. She just watched. "Does she know everything?" Thomas asked. "She remembers more than you think." He buried his face in his hands. "I did not mean to hurt anyone." "But you did." That night, I called the police. I gave them everything. The box. The location. The story. Thomas was arrested. Ellie stayed with me. She never spoke about it again. But the drawings stopped. And the knocking never came back. You never really know what a child remembers. They live in a world made of fog and fragments. Moments flash, then vanish. But some things, some moments, sink deep and root themselves in places even adults cannot reach. I used to think Ellie was just quiet. Now I know she was surviving. After Thomas was arrested, the house fell silent in a different way. It was not the tense silence of secrets, but the hollow one left after someone finally admits the truth. Like the moment after a storm, when you walk outside and everything is still, too still. The wind gone. The sky holding its breath. But the damage already done. The police confirmed what we had found. The shallow burial site contained human remains, partially decomposed over time, damaged by weather, but still identifiable. DNA matched with Rachel and Porter. The name on the hospital bracelet. The name in the letters. The name no one in town remembered anymore. She had been erased. Replaced. Buried. And yet, her daughter had remembered her all along. The news spread fast. In a small town, it always does. Headlines softened the horror with words like tragedy and mental health concerns, but the facts were simple. A woman disappeared in 2012. She was buried under an oak tree in the local park, and no one even noticed. I gave the police everything. The photos, the letters, the stuffed rabbit and baby shoes. They collected them, catalogued them, bagged them. Evidence now. But I kept the drawings. Ellie stopped making them, but I could not throw them away. Each one felt like a scream no one had heard. A warning, repeated over and over again by a little girl who had no other way to speak. In the weeks that followed, Ellie and I fell into a quiet rhythm. We did puzzles together, watched old movies, made dinner. She rarely talked about Thomas, and I did not push. Sometimes I would catch her looking out the window, watching the wind move through the trees in our yard. She seemed older now, not in a physical way, but like something in her had aged, hardened. One afternoon, I found her sitting at the dining table with an old photograph. It was one of Rachel, a black and white shot I had overlooked in the box. Rachel was holding baby Ellie, smiling in front of a small house I did not recognize. "Where is that?" I asked. Ellie looked at me. "My real home," she said. I sat beside her. "Do you remember it?" She nodded. Sometimes I hear her voice, but only when it is really quiet. "Do you know what she is saying?" "She says thank you." Tears pricked my eyes. Ellie reached out and placed the photo in my hands. "She was not perfect," she said, "but she loved me." That night, I found myself standing in the doorway of Ellie's room, watching her sleep. She looked peaceful for the first time in months. No more tossing. No more muttering in her sleep. No more staring at the corners of the room like someone was there. I closed her door gently and went downstairs. I could not sleep. Instead, I sat in the kitchen with one of the drawings. The first one. The one she had left face down on the table that rainy Thursday. The tree was dark rough, but somehow full of detail, each line etched with intent. The roots, the base, the branches. The red crayon forming two words beneath. Right here. It struck me then how patient Ellie had been. She had drawn the same tree again and again, never yelling, never pleading, just quietly leaving them where I could find them, trusting I would eventually understand. I wondered if Rachel had tried to do the same, to speak, to reach out, through Ellie or through something else. A whisper in the hall. A knock on the basement door. A figure in the tree. Not malevolent. Just waiting. Waiting for someone to listen. When I finally went back to bed, it was nearly dawn. The house was still. Peaceful. For now. A few months passed. The investigation continued. Thomas remained in custody. His trial was set for the following spring. He tried to contact me once. A letter, mailed from the county jail. I read it once, then burned it. It was full of excuses. Apologies that felt empty. He asked how Ellie was doing. Said he missed her. Said he had nightmares now. Good, I thought. I never showed the letter to Ellie. She never asked about him. Sometimes people would stop me in the grocery store or at the post office. They would offer condolences. Whisper judgments. Ask quiet questions like, "Did you really not know?" Or "How is the little girl holding up?" I would smile politely. Say as little as possible. They did not deserve the answers. Ellie and I had our own healing to do. And healing, I had learned, was not loud. It was slow. Uneven. It happened in puzzle pieces. One morning in late fall, Ellie brought me a new drawing. I felt my heart stop when I saw it in her hand. She held it out to me with a strange expression. Not sadness, not fear. Something close to peace. The drawing was of a field. Wide. Open. Green. In the middle stood a tree, but this time it was not dark or twisted. It was full of leaves. Sunlight filtered through the branches. And at the base, instead of the words "right here," were new ones. She is free now. I looked at Ellie. She gave a small smile. The first I had ever seen. I hugged her tight, the paper crinkling between us. We never talked about the drawings again, but I kept that one too, framed it, hung it above her bed. People always want to know how a story ends. They want justice or redemption, or at least closure, something clean. But this story, this one does not end cleanly. Rachel never got to raise her daughter. Ellie will carry those memories, spoken and unspoken, for the rest of her life. And me? I became a mother not through birth, but through quiet moments of trust. Through listening. Through choosing to believe a child who had every reason to remain silent. Some nights, I still wake up at 3 a.m., expecting the knock. But it never comes. The house is quiet now. And sometimes, when the wind moves just right, I swear I can hear a voice in the trees outside. Not crying. Not calling. Just at peace.